قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وصلى الله على سيد الخلق أجمعين أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأصحابه الغر الميامين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال: إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to be covering the bio of the second Imam of A'immat al-Baqi', Sayyid al-Tabi'een wa Sayyid al-Abideen wa Zayn al-Abideen, al-Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi afdal as-salatu was-salam. And before we begin, I'm going to give just a very, very short introduction. So Imam as-Sajjad, Salamullahi alayh, represents something very, very interesting in the list of our 12 Imams. Those of you who attended our discussion on Imam al-Rida, I explained my methodology when it comes to studying the lives of the Imams. When we go over their biographies, we're not going to sit here and list sort of the narrations that they narrated, so much as we're going to talk about what was narrated about them, because we want to understand their lives. We want to understand what a narration from Imam as-Sajjad is going to look like compared to our other Imams. So I explained last time that, for example, we have a tendency to portray our Imams as somewhat robotic figures. They all have the same personality. They all are, just these really stoic, silent people. So when it comes to the biographies of our A'imma alayhim salam, there is a need to sort of understand the human aspect, to see what sets them apart. If I want to look at my Imams alayhim salam, I want to sort of be able to identify them. What makes Imam as-Sajjad different than the Imams that come before him? What makes him different from the Imams that come after him? So for starters, Imam as-Sajjad, something that sticks out very prominently is that unlike his father, his uncle, and his grandfather, Imam as-Sajjad did not play a very large role in politics. This is the sort of beginning of the Imams retiring away from the political situation of the Muslim Ummah. And there's a couple of reasons for this, and we'll go over them inshallah in the course of this lecture. But what this gives us a chance to do is, for example, with Imam Ali, we're analyzing the fiqh of battle against the kuffar and the fiqh of battle against the bughat. With Imam al-Hasan, we're analyzing, his peace treaty and the fiqh implications of that. With Imam al-Hussein, he's Sayyid al-Shuhada. It's mainly mourning. Imam as-Sajjad, his biography represents something different, and that is the power of hope and the power of healing. Because Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when you read about his life, you read about what he experienced at Karbala, which I'm sure all of you have heard about from years of listening to khutbah, years of attending majalis. Imam as-Sajjad, those events that you weep over every year, he saw them firsthand. There's a narration from one of our Imam alayhi salam, I don't remember which one it was, but someone asked him about something that happened at Karbala, and the Imam said to him, there are certain things that happened at Karbala that we cannot narrate to the mu'mineen, because we know there are some mu'mineen, if they heard these things, they would die of sorrow. Now imagine the man who witnessed all of this, the man who was marched from Karbala to Kufa, and every time he would look up, he would see the heads of his father, the heads of his uncles, the heads of his brothers, his cousins, his father's companions. He would see them all staring back at him. So this, when we discuss this, the damage, we would say, the psychological damage that we would say would be inflicted on a person who went through such a thing, we'd say that person would be traumatized for life. We say that person would become reclusive. They would, refuse to engage with society. But Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, as we said, his biography, it represents hope. It represents healing. Because that is mainly what I would say Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, was doing. He was healing the ummah. He was trying to, help them recover from the trauma of Karbala. And so when it comes to Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, like I think this is one of the major proofs of his isma, of his infallibility, is the fact that despite the fact that he went through that, he would become this titan of spirituality, this prime example of how a Muslim should worship Allah Azza wa Jal. He delivered to the greatest of nations the greatest of supplications. He delivered to us, our charter on human rights, as well as a hadith on tafsir of the Quran, and a hadith about how we should talk to Allah, as well as, of course, the details of what happened at Karbala. And so with that being said, let us go into the biography of Imam as-Sajjad salamullahi alayhi, and let us see what lessons we can learn from him. So Imam as-Sajjad salamullahi alayhi, the statistics, I always start out with the stats. He was born in the year 38 after Hijrah, and he died in the year 94 after Hijrah. So he was born in Medina, he died in Medina, and he is buried in Jannat al-Baqi' with his uncle Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba salamullahi alayhi, and his grandmother Sayyidah Fatima bint Asad alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad, when it comes to his lineage, he is often called, the best of both houses. His lineage is commonly referred to as that. And the reason why is because Imam Sajjad salamullahi alayhi, from his father's side, was the son of Imam al-Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. He is the son of an Imam, the nephew of an Imam, the grandson of an Imam, and the grandson of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That part of his lineage is, everyone knows that. But when it comes to his mother's side of the family, there's something very interesting. His mother was a lady known as Shahrabano. And Shahrabano was a princess, the daughter of the last emperor of the Sasanian Persian Empire. And her father was Yazdajurd III, who was like the last emperor of the Sasanian Empire before its final collapse. So she comes from the royal family of the Persians. And so people used to say, among the Arab, the best house of the Arab, the best dynasty, the best family of the Arab is Bani Hashim, particularly, the descendants of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And from the Ajam, from the non-Arabs, the best people are the Persians. And in the best family of the Persians is, of course, like their emperor, their royal house, their royal dynasty. And so Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi, he married Lady Shahrabano. She was gifted to him. And we'll go over that in a second. But Imam Sajjad salamullahi alayhi, when you look at him, he is the first of our Imams who we would say is multiracial or multi-ethnic, because his father is an Arab and his mother is a Persian, correct? And this is something that our opponents, unfortunately, because of the inherent racism at the foundation of their sect, they like to highlight this. Like Ibn Hazm used to highlight this. He's like, Shi'ism is just a reactionary sect that was innovated by the Persians in order to compensate for the fall of their empire. And so we'd say to Ibn Hazm, we're like, dude, open a history book. So say Zayn al-Abidin, his mother was Persian, but do you know how many Umayyad caliphs had Persian mothers? Because the Umayyad caliphs used to have Persian slave girls as well. You ask, for example, like Abdullah ibn Umar, he also had a wife who was Persian. Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr also had a wife who was Persian. And so when we look at this polemic of like, it's just because Imam Zayn al-Abidin was half Persians that the Iranians love Imam Zayn al-Abidin so much. We say, Habibi, relax. If you ask the Iranians who they love more, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas or Imam al-Sajjad, many of them will probably tell you they know more about Imam al-Abbas or Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is a full-blooded Arab. He's not Iranian at all. And yet he is something of a national hero to them, even though he is completely distant from them. Right? So this idea that Imam as-Sajjad salamullahi alayhi, the only reason we hold him in high regard is because of his half Persian lineage, we say this is not true. And we don't take pride in the fact that his ancestor was Yazdajurd, because Yazdajurd was a kafir. But the daughter of Yazdajurd, the Sayyidah Shahrabano, is greater than her father and all of her ancestors, because she was a Muslim and she was the wife of an Imam, and she is the maternal ancestor of all of our Imams. So the story of how Shahrabano ended up with Imam al-Hussein. How did this happen? Sayyidah Shahrabano and two of her sisters were captured during the Muslim conquest of Persia. And so they were taken back to Medina. So obviously they were brought before Umar. And Umar, they're like, these are the two daughters of the Persian emperor, and you decide what to do with them. Umar basically was of the opinion, it's like, just divide them up, give them away just like any other slave girl. And so Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam said to Umar, these ladies are princesses, and the only household worthy of hosting a princess, the only household that can be seen as the equal of a princess, is my household, is Bani Hashim. So give them to me. And so Umar said, fine, you can have them. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam gave one of them, Sayyidah Shahrabano, he gave her to Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi. The other two, he gave one of them to Sayyiduna Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and he gave the other one to Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. And so Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, his son al-Qasim ibn Muhammad, who is also the ancestor of the Imams, he was married to Sayyidah Shahrabano's sister. That means Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr would be the maternal uncle, the khalu, in a sense, of Imam as-Sajjad. And that means that his son al-Qasim, who we'll go over in a bit, who is a companion of Imam as-Sajjad, he was his cousin as well. So Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi, and the way I would explain this is he was trying to undo some of the damage that Umar was doing. Because as we know, Umar had a very particular policy towards the Persian people, towards the Ajam. He has many quotes, for example, where he talks very negatively about the Persian people. He says, whoever learns their language is this. And he used to, not allow Persian people into the city of Medina. And ironically, the man who, the exceptions that he made ended up playing a major role in his downfall. But in any case, we don't view our Imam as lesser or greater than any of the other Imams simply because his mother was a Persian woman. On the contrary, we believe this is a great honor for the Iranian people. We would say for the Persian people is that, one of the mothers of the Imam alayhim salam was a Persian lady, correct? So in any case, the rest of the stats regarding Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, we said he was born in the year 38 after Hijrah. So he was born 2 years into Imam Ali's Khilafah. So his grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayhi, he was 2 years old when Imam Ali was assassinated. And so he unfortunately probably did not, get to sit down with his grandfather and narrate hadiths from him directly. But no doubt Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi would have held him, would have seen him, would have congratulated his son on the birth of his grandson, Imam as-Sajjad. 12 years, so the first 2 years with Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, 12 years with his uncle, Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, salamullahi alayhi. And there's no doubt that Imam as-Sajjad was very close with Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba. And there are a few pieces of evidence we can quote to prove this. Number one, he is one of the people who narrates Imam al-Hasan's eulogy for Imam Ali, which we went over in the bio of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, salamullahi alayhi. The speech that Imam al-Hasan delivered after the death of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Masjid al-Kufa, this was narrated by Imam as-Sajjad. He is one of the people who narrates this khutbah. So he was there, he witnessed it firsthand, and he remembered it, and he narrated it. Now, the other evidences we would show to show his close relationship with Imam al-Hasan is Imam al-Hasan gave him one of his daughters to be his wife, Sayyidah Fatima bint al-Imam al-Hasan, salamullahi alayhi. And so Imam al-Hasan was not only his uncle, but he was his father-in-law. And there are many examples of ahadith, both in our books as well as in the books of our opponents, our brothers from the other sects. They narrate hadith from Imam as-Sajjad from Imam al-Hasan, salamullahi alayhi. And so this is something that a lot of people are like, who narrates hadith from Imam al-Hasan? So most of the people who narrate hadith from Imam al-Hasan are his descendants, his Shia, and then his nephew Imam Zayn al-Abidin, salamullahi alayhi. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with regards to his relationship with Imam al-Hasan, we brought this up in our khutbah on Imam al-Mujtaba, salamullahi alayhi. Imam al-Mujtaba, he used to, we mentioned the famous quote from him where he gathered his sons and his nephews, and he said to them, "O my sons, O my nephews, today you are the youth among the people, and tomorrow you will be the elders among the people. So seek knowledge, and whoever of you cannot, memorize or narrate hadith, then what should he do? He should write it down and store it in his house." No doubt Imam as-Sajjad is one of the people who took this advice from his uncle Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, salamullahi alayhi. Now, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, he lived 23 years total with Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi. So Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, obviously this is his father, Imam al-Hussein. He's the middle son. He's not the eldest, but he's not the youngest. We'd say he was the middle son of Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayh. And lastly, his imamah would last 34 years. He was Imam of the Shia. He was the Imam of the Ummah for 34 years. His Imamah lasted 34 years. And by comparison, Imam al-Hasan, salamullahi alayh, his Imamah lasted 10 years. Imam al-Hussein, his Imamah also lasted around 10 years. So his Imamah was considered, it was much longer than his father and his uncle. Now, with these stats out of the way, let's go over a little bit of his early life. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, it is narrated that Imam al-Hussein used to love the name Ali, and this is evidenced by the fact that he named most of his sons, or if not all of them, Ali. So the three most famous sons that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had, his eldest son was Ali al-Akbar. Ali al-Akbar, he was a full-blooded Arab. His mother was from Banu Thaqif, and she was also descended from Banu Umayyah maternally. His second son was Imam as-Sajjad, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein, and then his last son is Ali al-Asghar, who's the baby that was martyred at Karbala, and he is sometimes called Ali al-Asghar or Abdullah al-Radi'. There is a difference of opinion regarding what his actual name was. But Imam al-Hussein loved the name Ali, and this makes perfect sense because this was a time when people were cursing Imam Ali from the pulpit. They would curse him every Friday from the pulpit all over the Islamic empire. And so the name Ali was very, very detested. Let me give you an example. Ibn Abbas, radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, it is recorded that when he had a son, he named the son Ali. And he is recorded to have said, I named him after the most beloved person to me. Correct? So this is proof of Ibn Abbas's love for Amir al-Muminoon. He named his eldest son Ali ibn Abdullah ibn Abbas. He named him after Imam Ali. And so one day, he met Muawiyah in his court. And Muawiyah, la'anahullah, asked him, he said to him, it's come to my attention that you named your son Ali. He said, yes, I did. He said, what kunya did you give him? He says, I gave him the kunya Abu al-Hasan. He said, Ibn Abbas, change the name or change the kunya. I cannot stand someone with both. So Ibn Abbas said, I'm not going to change his name, but I'll change his kunya if that'll if that'll get you off my back. In any case, Imam as-Sajjad's older brother, Ali ibn al-Hussein, Ali al-Akbar, we'll mention a few things about him. Ali al-Akbar, salamullahi alayh, was said to have been extremely similar to Rasulullah in his physical appearance. It was uncanny how similar Imam as-Sajjad's older brother was to Rasulullah. And it is narrated that Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, or that Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayh, once a Jewish man or a Christian man came to meet him. And he said to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, I am not a Muslim, but I saw your ancestor Rasulullah in a dream, and he was guiding me to Islam, and he told me to come talk to you, and that you were the Imam of my time. You could answer all of my questions. So Ali al-Akbar, salamullahi alayhi, as we know, he was the perfect, would say he was the very similar to his grandfather Rasulullah. And so Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, said to the non-Muslim man, he said, hang on a minute. He said, go get my son Ali al-Akbar. They bring Ali al-Akbar. He says, is this the man you saw in your dream? So the non-Muslim man, he says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, he looks exactly like him. He says, this is his grandson. This is my son, Ali al-Akbar. And so Ali al-Akbar, once he was called into the court of I believe it was al-Walid ibn Uqba ibn Abi Sufyan, or Walid ibn Utbah ibn Abi Sufyan, sorry. Muawiyah's nephew, who was the governor of Medina. And so they bring him in. They bring in Ali al-Akbar. He says, what's your name? He says to him, my name is Ali. He says, you're not Ali. I've seen Hussein's son Ali. He said, no, that's my other brother Ali. And so al-Walid was angry. He said, Ali, 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 couldn't your father have come up with another name? And so he said to him, he said, I've heard my father say, he says, if I had 100 sons, I would name them all Ali. And so it is recorded in Ansab al-Ashraf. I love this quote. When I came across it, I read it for the first time. Muawiyah used to say, he says, the most perfect person for the Khilafah is Ali al-Akbar, because he is descended from Banu Hashim, from Banu Umayyah, and Banu Thaqif. And so obviously, we would say Muawiyah was jealous of Imam al-Hussein's son Ali al-Akbar, because he has a son, a noble son like Ali al-Akbar, while Muawiyah has a son like Yazid, who is a complete idiot. So, and the funny thing is, al-Baladri, what he says about this quote, he says this is a really famous quote, but I don't think Muawiyah is the one who said it. I think someone else said it, and Muawiyah like copied them, or someone attributed it to Muawiyah. In any case, this was the elder brother of Imam Sajjad Sanamullah alayhi. His younger brother was Abdullah al-Radi', who, as we know, was killed, at a very, very young age. Historians dispute over whether or not it was a few days or if it was a few months. He was killed at Karbala. In any case, Imam Sajjad Sanamullah alayhi, his biography begins with Imam al-Hussein as he's leaving Karbala. I would say his biography as an imam, not as up until now we see him, as the student, as the scholar, but it truly begins, where do we want to start? It begins as Imam al-Hussein is getting ready to leave to go to Karbala. Imam al-Hussein, salamullah alayhi, takes a special stop. He makes a special stop before leaving Medina. Where does he go? He goes to the house of al-Muminoon, Salama, salamullah alayha. And Salama, salamullah alayha, we've covered her biography before, but we will bless our majlis by mentioning the manaqib that she has. Salama, salamullah alayha, I have a nickname for her. I call her the keeper of the relics of al-Muhammad. Why? Because Imam Ali, before he left to go to Iraq, he visited her and he left certain items with her. And he told her, when my son Al-Hasan comes back to Medina, you give these to him. Right? So Imam Al-Hasan, salamullah alayhi, when he came back from Iraq, immediately he went to the house of Salama and she gave him the relics of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. And these confirmed his imamah. Likewise, Imam al-Hussein, before he went to Iraq, he left the relics with her as well. So the Dhul Fiqar, the sword of Rasulullah, the sword of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he left it with her. The pennon of the Prophet, he left it with her. The armor of the Prophet, he left it with her. He left the Jafr with her, the Mus'haf of Fatima, all the relics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the prophets that came before him, he left them with Sayyidah Salama. That is how much the Ahlul Bayt loved and revered this great woman. And so someone asked the question, you say, but why? Why didn't he just give them to Imam Sajjad? Well, the reason why is because, this is something I always used to wonder about as a kid. I'm like, did Imam al-Hussein use the Dhul Fiqar at the Battle of Karbala? And the answer is most likely no, because Imam al-Hussein knew he was going to die, as we have multiple authentic reports that confirm this. And so the issue here becomes that if Imam al-Hussein had taken these relics with him, and he knew he was going to be martyred, these people cut off Imam al-Hussein's fingers just to take his ring. The clothes on his back, they robbed him of it. His head was being passed around like a trophy, bi abi huwa wa ummi. So what do you think would have happened to the armor and the relics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So when it comes to the relics of the Prophet, he left them with Sayyidah Salama, salamullah alayha. And so when Imam Sajjad salamullah alayhi is coming back from Karbala, the first house he goes to is the house of Salama. And Salama salamullah alayha, she died not long after Imam Sajjad returned and took these relics. And my personal theory, wallahu a'lam, is that, the news of the tragedy of Karbala, that was too much for her. That was what ended up, bringing her life to an end. And so when it comes to Imam Sajjad's bio, Imam Sajjad salamullah alayhi, when he was at Karbala, he was planning to fight alongside his uncles, his brothers, the companions of Imam al-Hussein. But he became very, very ill. And we have some narrations that say even Imam al-Hussein was ill on the day of Ashura. Which is why, for example, you don't see him on the front lines all the time. You see that the reason why he was the very last one to be killed is because Yazid's army, la'inahumullah, they were all so scared, no one wanted to do the deed of personally killing al-Hussein ibn Ali. And on top of that, he was also very ill. He was fighting while also being sick, according to some reports. Now, Imam Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, because of his illness, he was not, obligated to fight. And so, when the battle was over after his father had been martyred, it is said that Ash-Shimr and Umar ibn Sa'ad came in, and Ash-Shimr, la'inahullah, wanted to kill him. But Umar ibn Sa'ad said, he's just a kid, leave him alone. He's young, he's sick, he's harmless, he can't hurt us. And so Imam as-Sajjad, Salamullahi alayhi, was taken to Kufa. He was taken to Kufa basically as a prisoner of war. And he was paraded through the town, and he reached Masjid al-Kufa, where he confronted Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And so Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he mocked the Imam, and he ordered his soldiers, kill him, behead him. But Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha, she threw herself on her nephew, and she said to Ibn Ziyad, it's like, if you want to kill him, you'll have to kill me first. And he also said to Ibn Ziyad, he said to Ibn Ziyad, perhaps you are non-mahram to these women, or you have someone who is non-mahram to these women, a male who will travel with them. So he basically, he shamed him. He's like, you're not an honorable man. You're sending these women to Yazid, and they don't have, someone who's mahram to them. So Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, was taken to the court of Yazid. And in the court of Yazid, he famously has a confrontation with Yazid, la'inahullah. And according to most historical reports, in Yazid's court, he was desperately trying to do damage control. He ordered his women to cry for Hussein, and he blamed the whole thing on Ibn Ziyad. He's like, I had nothing to do with it. Hussein, broke the ties of kinship. He brought this upon himself. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, during his entire encounter with Yazid, he never lost his composure. He never lost his temper. His own son, Muhammad al-Baqir, attacked in his court. And so Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when it was all over, there's a very interesting report that I would like to share with you. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, Yazid asked him, and Allahu a'lam when it comes to his intentions. Some say, he was doing this just politically. Some say he was genuine about this. I, for one, don't believe he's genuine, but Allahu a'lam. We do su'ul dhan with the nawasib. Anyway, he asked Imam as-Sajjad an interesting question. He said to him, can Allah forgive me for what I did to Hussein? It's a very interesting question. Imagine someone had killed your father. And he said, can Allah forgive me for killing your father? For what I did? For what I brought about? For what I've done to you? I brought you here as a prisoner of war. I disrespected your father. I'm the source of all of your troubles. Can Allah forgive me for what I've done? Imam as-Sajjad said to him, he said, yes, he can. There's a special dua, a special prayer that you can pray, and if you pray it, Allah will forgive you. Narration that I've heard, it says that Sayyidah Zainab said to him, she said to him, why would you tell him that? It's like, my nephew, why would you tell him that? Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, said, Allah will not bless him to the point where he will be able to do it. So Yazid, sure enough, the narration says, every time he would, try to do this prayer, his wudu would break. He would get distracted by something else. He would break wind, right? His wudu would break, and he would never be able to do it, and so he never ended up doing it. And so, but this shows you the character of Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi. And so, after staying in Yazid's court for a while, Yazid, gave them back the heads, according to some reports, and he gave them money and gifts, and he, sent an armed escort, escort them back to Medina and make sure nothing happens to them. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, was now the head of his household. And so, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when he returned to Medina, as we say, he took the relics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Salama, and that is how his imamah began. Now, let's take a look at the damage here. Imam Zain al-Abidin, most of his uncles were gone. The sons of Amir al-Muminoon, salamullahi alayhi, most of them were gone. The only one who was left, we would say, was Umar ibn Ali and Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. And Umar ibn Ali was not exactly on good terms with Imam as-Sajjad. He gave Imam as-Sajjad a lot of trouble later. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah is basically locked up. Ibn Zubayr locked him up and wanted to burn him because, of the whole issue with Mukhtar. Most of the Shia, the loyal Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, had been killed at Karbala. His aunt Zainab alayhi salam, she's lost all of her sons. The damage here is, words cannot express the hardship that Imam Zain al-Abidin was being confronted with. On top of that, who's the ruler? The rulers are, you have Mukhtar, you have Yazid, you have Abdullah ibn Zubair. Not exactly the best of people. Correct? Now, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when he came back to Medina during this time, it is said that a poet came out to meet him. And he said to the poet, he says, I do not want to enter the city unless it is in a state of mourning. And so when he entered the city, the people were basically weeping over Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, we would expect him, as we mentioned in our introduction, to go to his house, to close his doors, and to never engage with this ummah ever again. After the betrayal, after the backstabbing, after the negligence they had shown him and his household. Correct? I mean, I think it's what I would do. I believe that many of us would do the same. Many of us would look at this ummah and we'd say, I never want to see these people again. I never want to encounter these people again. Correct? The trauma of witnessing the massacre at Karbala, it would have been too much for any of us to sustain. But Allah Azza wa Jal knows where He puts His risala. And He chose Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam for a reason. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when he returned to Medina, he began a policy of political quietism. What does this mean? It means he would not openly support any of the sides in the conflict. And this is something that I always find very interesting. A lot of people, when they see, for example, the non-Muslims going at it, they have to take a side. When they see the Sunnis and the Ismailis going at it, they have to take a side. When they see Ibadis versus it, they have to take a side. So no, we have to choose one side. No, you don't. You don't have to get involved in every single dispute. Sometimes the best thing you can do is focus on yourself. Focus on improving yourself. Focus on, healing yourself. That is what Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, chose to do, is he looked at the politics of the ummah and he realized that all of these factions were essentially corrupt in one way or another, and he, could not afford to get involved with this. The ummah needed him for something else. Imam Amir al-Muminoon, Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein had tried. They had given these people every single chance, but Imam as-Sajjad was not obligated to do this anymore. And so Imam as-Sajjad, someone asked, well, why? Why him and not the other three? Well, the reason why is because Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayhi, Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, they had enough supporters and they had enough power to make a stance. Imam as-Sajjad simply did not. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, as I said, most of the righteous Shia had been massacred at Karbala. He had to rebuild. The madhab in terms of followers needed some, it needed a boost. It needed someone to help it recover. Correct? Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, during these years in Medina, it is said that, I'm going to point out something. SubhanAllah, I've done the biography. I've read about the biography of Imam as-Sajjad for years. I never noticed this. Correct? Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when he came back to Medina, shortly thereafter, the Battle of Harra took place, where the people of Medina were attacked by Yazid's army. His army entered and sacked the city for 3 days, during which they committed unbelievable atrocities. It is said that for years, whenever someone would try to get married in Medina, the father would tell the person asking for the hand, he'd say, my daughter is not a virgin, because of what happened at Al-Harra. It is also narrated that Yazid's army, what did they do? After, taking the city, they went and took their horses and they tied them near the grave of the Prophet. And so the horses would urinate and defecate near the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And just to give you an example of the horror that Yazid's army inflicted on the people of Medina, after 3 days of just massacre, of the city being sacked, Muslim ibn Uqba, or Musrif ibn Uqba rather, la'natullahi alayh, he ordered his men, he said to them, he's like, okay, gather the people in Masjid al-Kufa. They gathered them in Masjid al-Kufa. He said to them, or not Masjid al-Kufa, I'm sorry, Masjid al-Nabawi, Masjid al-Madinah, he says, it is time for you to give bay'ah to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And so one man stood up and said, I will give bay'ah to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Yazid ibn Muawiyah on the Quran and the Sunnah. And so when Musrif ibn Uqba, la'anahullah, when he heard this, he beheaded the man. And he turned to the audience, he says, I did not put the condition of Quran and Sunnah. There is no Quran, and so you don't give conditions when you give bay'ah to Amir al-Mu'mineen Yazid. You give conditions on whatever he wants. And so the people, they rose up and they gave bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And to this day, we have, the hashtag Yazid did nothing wrong. Hashtag Yazid is innocent. You have Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Hazm and, Amir Yazid, he did nothing wrong, and we don't curse him and we don't assume anything about him. I say, Habibi, if you're reluctant to curse Yazid, wallah, you have no morals. Wallah al-azim, you have no morals. And the funny thing is, you have the likes of Ghazali saying it's not permissible to curse Yazid. In any case, Imam al-Hussein, salamullah alayh, interestingly, when this was happening, Ali ibn al-Hussein, rather, when all of this was happening, you know what he did? He had some land outside of Medina, and that is where he took refuge, and multiple families joined him. They begged him, they said, Yabna Rasulullah, we can't stay in Medina, we're afraid, Yazid's army, what are they going to do to us? Imam as-Sajjad could have said, my father asked you for your help, he asked for your assistance, and you abandoned him. None of you responded to his call. And now you come to me to protect you from the same army that massacred my family? He could have shut the door in their faces, but you know what Imam Sajjad did? He took them in. Because the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet ﷺ are the greatest of sanctuaries. In any case, one of the most amazing examples of the Imam's just absolute nobility is, you know which family came to his doorstep one day? Marwan ibn al-Hakam. Marwan ibn al-Hakam, anyone who has been with us for a while, we have narrated many narrations about this man, about how the Prophet cursed him when he was a baby, and he warned that the tyrants of Banu Umayyah would come from his lineage, and how he used to curse Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayh, how he fought Imam Ali at Jamal, at Siffin, and then later, he was one of Muawiyah's governors, he would curse the Imam every Friday, he would insult Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein. Marwan came to Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he said to him, O Ali ibn al-Hussein, Yazid's army will not distinguish between Umayyad and non-Umayyad when they get to Medina. So please keep my can you take my family in? What would you have done in that situation? Marwan ibn al-Hakam had come to you asking, he said, can you take care of my family? Imam Sajjad said, sure. Marwan's own wife, you know what she narrates? She says, in all my years, keep in mind, this lady would later become a queen. Her son Abdul Malik would later become the caliph. She says, in all my years, I have never been hosted by a host better than Ali ibn al-Hussein when I was a guest at his house. It's like between the palaces of Damascus and the home of Imam Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, I would prefer to stay in the house of Imam Sajjad. And one of the people, obviously who was there is Abdul Malik's son, or Marwan's son, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And so Imam Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, Mushrif ibn Uqba, la'inahullah, the man who sacked Medina, ordered him to be brought to Medina. When he brought him to Medina, he gave him gifts, and he said, your cousin Yazid sends his salam, and he told me to make sure you don't get hurt. Is anything needed from you? And so Imam Sajjad simply said to him, you don't need to apologize to me on behalf of your Amir. The army of Banu Umayyah moved on to Mecca, as we know, and they besieged the Kaaba, and then within a few, during the siege, Yazid, la'inahullah, he perished. And so the Umayyad army retreated. And so this began the rise of Ibn Zubayr. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, completely avoided Ibn Zubayr in the same way he avoided Banu Umayyah. And so when we go over this period, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, is doing his best to stay out of all these political conflicts and these disputes. Let's go over who the main players were. We've discussed Ibn Zubayr, we've discussed Mukhtar, who was in Iraq, going after Imam al-Hussein's killers. But the other figure that we need to discuss is Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, when he was young, his father Marwan, grew up as the son of Haram, this man involved in all this fitna. He wanted his son Abdul Malik to be, a pious man. He wanted him to have a reputation as a man who is, has embraced Islam, and he's a scholar, and he really doesn't, neglect his religion. And so Abdullah ibn Umar, there's a narration about him in Tarikh Baghdad where they used to ask him, they're like, oh, Ibn Umar, you elders of Quraysh, you're going to die out. Who do we go to after you? He's like, go to Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Marwan has a son who is a faqih. So mashallah, these are the fuqaha of our opponents. Muawiyah also, he used to praise Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. He's like, mashallah, Marwan has a son, very well raised, he's very respectful in the court, he knows how to conduct himself. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, when he was young, they used to call him Hamamatul Masjid because of how much time he used to spend hanging out in the mosque, asking questions. And so, all the Sahaba, the elders of the Sahaba, they knew him, and he would study under them, and he used to love reading the Quran. And so they called him Hamamatul Masjid, the pigeon of the mosque, because he's always hanging out in the mosque. And so Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, it is said that when he saw Yazid's army marching towards Medina, you know what he said? He said, what is wrong with you people? How could you people serve a man who attacks the city of Rasulullah Sallallahu alayhi wa. How could you serve a man who orders you to attack Baytullah al-Haram? Watch what happens to this man a few years later. After Yazid died, Bani Umayyah, who did they choose, to lead them now? The elder fitna monger of Bani Umayyah, Marwan ibn al-Hakam, who at this point was in his 60s. Marwan rules for 6 months, he dies. Who becomes the Khalifa after him? Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan has said that when he got the news that his father died and that he had become the Khalifa, he was sitting in his room reading the Quran. When he got the news, he said, Abdul Malik, you are now Amir al-Mu'mineen. Abdul Malik, he is said to have looked at the Quran and said, هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ. This is the end between me and you. He spat in the Quran and he closed it. Then he gives his famous coronation speech. He says, I am not weak like Uthman, nor am I cunning like Muawiyah, nor am I a homosexual like Yazid. And he used to warn people. He says, I don't want anyone to do Amr bil Ma'ruf or Nahi an al Munkar with me. For me, khalas, is Bani Umayyah, we are here to stay. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, someone looks at his situation at this time. Bani Umayyah had lost control of Iraq. They had lost control of Egypt. They had lost control of Hijaz. They were on the verge of losing control of Sham. Abdul Malik, through his sheer political conniving and cunning, managed to bring Bani Umayyah back from the brink of collapse. And it was in part due to his brutality. And the main instrument of his brutality, his secret weapon, was al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi. La'inahullah. Al-Hajjaj went to, he was the commander of his armed forces, of Abdul Malik's forces, and slowly but surely, Abdul Malik began to reconquer the Islamic Empire until finally, his main enemy was Ibn Zubayr. He besieged Ibn Zubayr in Mecca. And this is, subhanAllah, the irony, is that under Yazid, the Kaaba had been hit with catapults. Ibn Zubayr told me, he was like, there's no way Yazid would do that. It's like, dude, he killed the Prophet's grandson. You think he killed the Prophet's family, killed the Prophet's grandson. He attacked the Prophet's city. You think he reveres Mecca in any sort of way? In fact, under Yazid, they attacked the Kaaba. Then under Abdul Malik, they did it again. They did it a second time. Bani Umayyah, under Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, his main commander was al-Hajjaj. He said, starve the people of Mecca into submission. Every day during the siege, he ordered the catapults to fire on the Kaaba until it was practically reduced to rubble. And then finally, when his forces went into the city, they killed Ibn Zubayr right next to the Kaaba, they beheaded him and crucified his body. These are the people who were the rulers during the time of Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi. Many of the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, in Iraq were murdered in cold blood by al-Hajjaj. And so this is who Imam Zayn al-Abidin was dealing with. Keep in mind, Abdul Malik a few years ago had been a guest in his own house, in Imam as-Sajjad's own house. But when Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, was in Medina at this time, Mukhtar was obviously trying to get him to give him support in Kufa. Imam as-Sajjad refused. Abdul Malik wanted his support, he also refused. Ibn Zubayr wanted his support, he also refused. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, he was even taken to Damascus in chains again. Most people, they think he only went to Damascus in chains once. It happened a second time under the reign of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Now, let's discuss, and we'll get back to his relationship with Abdul Malik in a bit, but let's discuss Imam as-Sajjad's companions. Who are Imam as-Sajjad's companions? As in every Imam, alayhi salam, has companions. Sometimes they're not easy to find, but he has them. They're absolutely there. Imam as-Sajjad, among his companions, was Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, the famous tabi'i. Sa'id ibn Jubair, the famous tabi'i, who was once a student of Ibn Abbas, and then a student and a companion of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, and he was eventually murdered by al-Hajjaj. He is considered the final victim of al-Hajjaj, la'natullahi alayh. His other companions were Abu Hamza al-Thumali, who narrates the Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya, as well as the famous Dua Abi Hamza. And Abi Hamza al-Thumali, salamullahi alayhi, we have narrations about him that say, during the time of Imam as-Sajjad, he was like Salman was to Rasulullah. He was the Salman of his time, Abu Hamza al-Thumali. Abu Hamza was a loyal servant, a companion of Imam as-Sajjad, and 3 of his sons were killed while fighting alongside Sayyidina Zayd al-Shahid, salamullahi alayhi, Imam as-Sajjad's son. So he was loyal to Imam as-Sajjad, and his sons were loyal to Imam as-Sajjad's son, Zayd al-Shahid, salamullahi alayhi. His other companions are Abu Khalid al-Kabuli, and I'll narrate to you the story of Abu Khalid al-Kabuli. Abu Khalid al-Kabuli, radwanullah ta'ala alayhi, he was from Kabul, from modern-day Afghanistan. He was a Ajami. He came to Medina, and he became a student, a disciple of Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. One day he asked Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, he said, "Are you really the Imam?" He said to him, "No, I'm not really the Imam. The Imam is my nephew, Ali ibn al-Hussein." Salamullahi alayhi. He went to Imam as-Sajjad's house. As he was approaching Imam as-Sajjad's house, Imam as-Sajjad called out to him. He said to him, "Kankar, come inside." Kankar in Arabic, it means the one with messy hair, right? He says, "I have been waiting for you. Come in, come in." Abu Khalid ta'ala alayhi entered Imam as-Sajjad's home. He says, "Ya ibn Rasulullah, no one has called me by that name except for my mother. My mother all the way out in Afghanistan when I was a little boy. How did you know this name?" He said to him, "Abu Khalid, do you think that I, as the Imam, don't know the names of my Shia?" And this is such a powerful hadith. This hadith brings tears to my eyes. Do you know why? Because that means Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, Ajjallahu Faraj al-Sharif, just like his ancestor Imam Sajjad knows all the names of his Shia, inshallah, he knows our name as well, if we are truly among his Shia. It's beautiful that I occupy even such a small piece within the conscience of my Imam, that he knows my name. He knows me by name. Abdul Malik did not know the names of all of the people who called him Khalifa and Amir al-Muminoon. But Imam as-Sajjad did. Correct? And his other companions were his cousin Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, who had been raised by Aisha, because after Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr was murdered in Egypt, his aunt Aisha raised him. Then he became a disciple of Imam as-Sajjad, and he narrates many narrations from Imam as-Sajjad. And then Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, radwanullahi ta'ala, salamullahi alayhi, the companion of Rasulullah, the companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the companion of Al-Hasan, the companion of Al-Hussein, and the companion of Imam al-Baqir. He passed away during the lifetime of Imam al-Baqir. 5 of our Imams, almost half of our A'imma, he managed to meet all of them. Salamullahi alayhi. But when it comes to his companions, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, this close knit group of disciples around him, what did he focus on? Did Imam focus on the topics of bara'ah? For example, we'd say yes, there are many narrations from Imam as-Sajjad where he talks about bara'ah and the importance of dissociating from the enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Correct? But he, we would say, did not focus on it. We don't have that as many narrations from him about this topic as, for example, we have from al-Baqir and as-Sadiq. And the reason why is because Bani Umayyah were at the height of their power. To do ta'an of them and the people who brought them to power would have been a death sentence. Correct? But one of the most interesting companions of Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, was Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri. Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri, those of you who know Islamic history and you know like the history of narrations and rijal, you're no stranger to az-Zuhri. Az-Zuhri, Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri was a partisan of Bani Umayyah. He worked in their government. And he, had a position within their government. And so, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, the story of how he and az-Zuhri became friends is rather interesting. And we don't necessarily say friends, but they became associates. They became acquainted with one another. And there are some hadith in al-Kafi from Muammar, from az-Zuhri, from Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi. But az-Zuhri, story of how he became acquainted with Imam as-Sajjad is very beautiful. It's narrated by Ibn Shahr Ashub in his Manaqib al-Abi Talib. So, az-Zuhri works for Bani Umayyah, and he's working as a governor, politician. He had some sort of role in the Umayyad administration. One day, he is ordered to torture a man. People, it's Bani Umayyah. People get tortured, people die. The man he tortured died. Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri was so heartbroken. We'd say his consciousness, his conscience couldn't take it. Sorry. And, when this happened, he was just sort of traumatized. And so what he did, he left his post, he left his family, he left his friends for years. He was just living alone in a state of absolute depression. And so one year, he comes to Hajj. And so he encounters Imam Zayn al-Abidin, salamullahi alayhi. And encountering Imam Zayn al-Abidin at Hajj is something special. We'll go over the most famous instances in a bit. But he encounters Imam Zayn al-Abidin at Hajj. keep in mind, look at the parallels. One man is the grandson of Rasulullah. One, he witnessed Karbala, he lost all his family. But he's the exact opposite of a bitter, traumatized, depressed man. The spiritual strength of Imam as-Sajjad was so great, even the Malaika would look at Imam as-Sajjad and envy his worship. Correct? And you have a Zuhri, who, after going through this, he's just completely done. He's broken. He needs to heal. Correct? He comes across Imam as-Sajjad. Imam as-Sajjad, you know what he says to him? He says to him, Zuhri, what you're doing to yourself, right? What you're doing to yourself now is a bigger sin than what you did before. I'm more afraid of you of what you're doing to yourself now than what the mistake you made. Go pay the diya and reconnect with your family and friends. As Zuhri, it was Imam as-Sajjad who gave him the courage to come back. The courage to, try to pick up the pieces and move on. And someone has to ask the question. He says, but who was there for Imam as-Sajjad at Karbala when he had to pick up the pieces and move on? Correct? And so as Zuhri used to say, he says, I never met anyone from that household, meaning the Bani Hashim, who is better than Ali ibn Hussein, Zayn al-Abidin. It got to the point, you know what Bani Umayyah would say to him when he was back working in their court? They would say to him, did you hear about what your prophet, Ali ibn Hussein, has done this time, Zuhri? And so as Zuhri, there are many narrations from him about Imam as-Sajjad. Not all of them are authentic, of course not. But he narrates the fada'il of Imam as-Sajjad, and he used to have a love for Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, because in a way, Imam as-Sajjad is the one who saved him, correct? Who pulled him out of that hole that he was in. The other companion of Imam as-Sajjad that we will go over, inshallah, we will cover his biography in more depth, is Sa'id ibn Jubair, who is al-Hajjaj's final victim. But Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, during these years in Medina, there's something that I said this earlier in my research. I've gone over it multiple times, but I never noticed something. Imam as-Sajjad was really famous for something he used to do while he was in Medina. Every night, he would get a bag, and he would fill it with food, clothes, money, and he would go around Medina giving it out. And he would wear a mask so no one could see who he was. Sometimes he would leave it there, and he wouldn't even encounter the family. Sometimes they'd come out and greet him. Imam as-Sajjad was practicing the sunnah of Rasulullah, that hadith of the Prophet, which says the best sadaqah is the one you give in secret. Because then it's between you and Allah. You're not going around saying, you see how I help the poor? You see how I help them? Imam as-Sajjad used to give it in secret. And you know what really shocked me? I only realized this during my research for this lecture. I've read the story, I've heard the story 1,000 times about how Imam as-Sajjad used to go out at night, giving food to the people. But you know what I realized? Why does Imam as-Sajjad do this? Is because these people need help. Someone needed to help these people. Do you know why the people of Medina needed help so badly? Because during Waqa'at al-Harra, you know how many people were made into orphans and widows? Do you know how many people lost their main source of income? Do you know how many people they felt Allah has cut off my rizq? But Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, what does he say? He says, no. As long as Ali ibn al-Hussein is here, your rizq is on me. I will make sure it reaches you. The reason why Imam as-Sajjad was doing this is because so many people in Medina had lost their sources of income. So many people of Medina had lost someone, just like Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, and he realized that someone had to help them. Imam as-Sajjad, there are two famous anecdotes about him in this regard. One of them is that Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, when he used to do this, there was a man who came out to him. He said, may Allah bless you, sir. Keep in mind the Imam is wearing a mask. He just said, may Allah bless you, sir. You've helped me so much. You saved me and my family. May Allah bless you, and may He not bless Zayn al-Abidin, because Zayn al-Abidin has not done anything for me, but you are going out of your way to help me. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, at that moment, what we've done, we would have pulled down the mask, because what are you talking about? I'm here helping you, and you're insulting me? Imam as-Sajjad didn't do that. Another anecdote, you know what it says? No one knew it was him. As in, subhanAllah, when we talk about heroes, superheroes, they put on the mask and they go around helping people. This is it. This is what a real hero looks like. Is an Imam Ma'soom from the Ahlul Bayt going out of his way to feed people, correct? To clothe them, to protect them from poverty, to put food on the table every night. Imam as-Sajjad, no one knew who it was. No one knew who this masked man going around helping people in Medina at night, who it was. Do you know when they actually found out? When Imam as-Sajjad died and people stopped getting their food, they realized that whole time it was Ali ibn al-Hussein. Imam as-Sajjad, we'll get back, we'll reference this again, inshallah, towards the end. But when it comes to his akhlaq, let me tell you some stories about his akhlaq. Because the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt, when we read about their generosity, we're like, subhanallah. But you know what always brings about the greater subhanallah? Is the akhlaq of al-Muhammad. Sallallahu alayhim. Imam Sajjad, there was once a relative of his, it was al-Hasan al-Muthanna, al-Hasan ibn ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, his own cousin and his brother-in-law. One day, Imam al-Hasan, Imam Zayn al-Abidin and al-Hasan al-Muthanna, they had an issue. Al-Hasan al-Muthanna was insulting him and yelling at him, and Imam Sajjad's companions are sitting there watching, right? Like these two Hashemites, these two grandsons of Imam Ali, Imam Sajjad is just being quiet the entire time. Hasan al-Muthanna got up and left. He got up and left angrily. Imam Sajjad looked at his companions. He says, follow me and you'll see my response. So he went to Al-Hasan al-Muthanna's house. Al-Hasan al-Muthanna came out to meet him. He thought he was going to insult him and attack him in front of his family. It's like, look, you attack me in my house, I'm going to attack you in your house. Right? You know what Imam Zayn al-Abidin said to him? He said to him, my dear cousin, if what you said about me is true, then may Allah forgive me. And if what you said about me is false, then may Allah forgive you. And with that, Imam as-Sajjad turned to go home. Al-Hasan al-Muthanna came up behind him and hugged him. He said, no, my cousin, I am the one who is wrong. I am the one who should be asking forgiveness of you. This was the akhlaq of Imam as-Sajjad. You say that's his cousin, that's his relative. They were playmates when they were younger. Let me give you another example. There was a man who's the governor of Medina, Hisham ibn Ismail al-Makhzumi, who is the grandfather of Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, the future Umayyad Khalifa. He was the governor of Medina for Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan. Hisham ibn Ismail al-Makhzumi, and Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik is named after his grandfather. His mother named him after her father. This man used to hate Imam Zayn al-Abidin. Every day he sees Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he insults him, he mocks him, he degrades him. Imam Zayn al-Abidin doesn't respond. Finally, Al-Walid becomes the Khalifa. He orders us to remove him from power. He's fired. We've gotten too many complaints about him. They remove him. Who becomes the governor now? Umar ibn Abd al-Aziz. Umar ibn Abd al-Aziz, you know what he does to Hisham ibn Ismail? He says, tie him up in the middle of the courtyard of Medina. And anyone who has a problem with him, let him go and take his vengeance upon him. So Hisham, who was once the governor, now he's at the mercy of the citizens of Medina. Correct? He's tied up to a pole in the middle of the city, in the middle of the under the hot sun. Who does he hear coming towards him? Imam as-Sajjad. Now you're thinking, dude, it's time for revenge. It's time for vengeance. Correct? Imam as-Sajjad, I've heard one narrator. How does he narrate? This is recorded in Kitab al-Irshad, but I heard one narrator. What does he say? He said Imam as-Sajjad went up to him and he consoled him. He told him it's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure no one hurts you or your family. I've already told all of my followers to leave you alone. And then he gave him some water. It's hot. You shouldn't be out here like this. And he told Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, he says, you tell your followers, your students, any of your friends, leave this man alone. Don't humiliate him anymore. Hisham bin Ismail, what did he do? He started weeping. He says, indeed, Allah knows where he puts his risalah, who he entrusts with his message. This is one of his worst enemies, we would say. Correct? Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, is narrated by his son Muhammad al-Baqir when it comes to his worship, when it comes to his, love of worship. He says, I once saw my father, Ali ibn al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, one night, I woke up to see him in the morning. His nose was flat. His nose had been squashed from all the sujood. He had a bruise on his forehead. His skin looked yellow and pale, and his legs looked sore. And when I saw him like this, I started crying. Imam as-Sajjad said to him, my son, what's wrong? He says, it hurts me to see you like this, father. Imam as-Sajjad told him, he said, my son, this is just a fraction of the worship that Amir al-Muminoon, that my grandfather Amir al-Muminoon used to do. Hand me that parchment. Right? Hand me that parchment. I have these scrolls that have the ibadat of Amir al-Muminoon, salamullahi alayhi. Let me give you another example of his God-wariness. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, whenever he used to do wudu, just like his uncle Imam al-Hasan, this story is narrated about both of them. Whenever he would do wudu, he would become pale. And people would say to him, like, are you okay? Like his flesh would turn yellow, according to the narration. He said to him, the people say to him, they say, Imam, what's wrong? He said to them, he says, how can I not go pale? How could I not be nervous and scared? Don't you know who I'm about to talk to? I'm about to talk to Allah Azza wa Jal. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, it is narrated about him that once he saw a group of people, they were basically saying some things about Allah, about the attributes of Allah, which were, we would say sort of blasphemous. What do you say? He said about these people when he saw them doing this. The Kitab al-Irshad says they were describing Allah in terms of His creation. Imam as-Sajjad became fearful and frightened of that. Immediately he goes to the qabr of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says the following. He says, "Oh my Allah, your power has been shown, but the form of your majesty has not been shown. They are ignorant of you and they try to estimate you on the basis of what you are not, and they make comparisons with you. O my Allah, I renounce those who seek to discover you through human comparisons. My Allah, there is nothing like you, and they have not become aware of you. It is clear that the favor which they have is their evidence for you. If they would choose to know you in your creation, my Allah, I am free from the fact that they should give you these characteristics. Indeed, they have pictured you according to your creation. Thus, they do not know you and have adopted some of your signs as if their Lord in that way. As their Lord. In that way, they have attempted to describe you. May you be exalted, O my Allah, above the pictures of you of those who try to describe you in human terms." This is Imam as-Sajjad basically discussing Tawheed. And there is no better Tawheed than the Tawheed taught by the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim as-salam. Let me give you some more. Imam Sajjad, we have narrations that say he used to pray 1,000 rak'ah a day. And I've seen some scholars, they say, this is not possible. This hadith doesn't make any sense. Shaykh al-Amini, rahimahullah, there's a story about him. It said once he encountered a Sunni scholar who said to him, is it true in your books that you say Imam Sajjad used to pray 1,000 rak'ah a day? He said, yeah. He said to him, you people are crazy. He said, come with me to the mosque, I'll do it for you right now. He went with him to the mosque. Shaykh al-Amini began praying. After a while, the Sunni Shaykh, he realized, 1,000 rak'ah a day is possible if you know how to do it. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, there are two narrations about him. One of them from Ibn Abbas, Ibn Abbas, he died during the imamah of Imam as-Sajjad. Once he was sitting in a gathering and he heard Imam as-Sajjad coming. He said, who is it? Who are you? He says, I am Ali ibn al-Husayn. Ibn Abbas grabbed him and pulled him close. He says, Ahlan bil Habib ibn al-Habib. Welcome the beloved son of my beloved. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, once Imam as-Sajjad came into his gathering, you know what he said? He said, I once heard Rasulullah, and Jabir salamullah alayhi was a companion of Rasulullah. He said, I once heard Rasulullah say, on the day of judgment, an angel will come and it will cry out. It will say, where is Sayyidul Abideen? Where is the ornament of the worshippers? And I will see, this is Rasulullah speaking, he says, and then I will see my son Ali ibn al-Husayn come forward. That's Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi. His merits are also, just like his father, Amir al-Muminoon, just like his uncle, Imam al-Hasan, just like his father, Imam al-Husayn, his merits are narrated by Rasulullah himself. And we'll see the same thing, inshallah, next week with Imam al-Baqir, salamullah alayhi. In any case, Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, would be taken to Damascus in chains. And as Zuhri narrates this, like, I saw him being taken to Damascus in chains, and I told him, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. I'll talk to Abdul Malik, I'll pull some strings. Imam as-Sajjad, you know what he did? He slipped his hands out of the chains. He said, Zuhri, you think these chains can hold me? This is not the first time I've escaped captivity. Correct? He says, I don't fear Abdul Malik. I only fear Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah will protect me from Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan once had a major problem. He got news that the Byzantine emperor, he sent him a letter. He said, I know you Muslims are still using our coins because you don't have your own coins. So if you don't do this for me, I will start writing on the coins curses of your God and your prophet. He sent a letter to Imam as-Sajjad. He says, I need your help. I don't know what to do here. Imam as-Sajjad told him, make your own coins. Make coins with the name and put, Islamic coins. You don't need to use the coins of the kuffar. Become economically independent. You don't need to become dependent on these people. as-Sajjad, did he look at this situation and say, oh, Abdul Malik is my enemy. He's from the household of Marwan ibn al-Hakam. I'm going to ignore him? He said, no. The ummah and the problems of the ummah take precedence over everything else. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, when it comes to his writings, we have many du'as from him. One of them is du'a al-thughur, the du'a for the front lines, where he prays for the mujahideen fighting to protect the Islamic nation. And he inflicts the curse of Allah. He asks Allah to inflict his curse on the enemies of the Muslim ummah. And it's a du'a still recited today whenever we go to war. Correct? Imam Sajjad, what else did he give us? He gave us Sahif as-Sajjadiyya, the Psalms of al-Muhammad. Correct? To this day, I always ask our opponents, I'm like, what did your caliphs give you? They gave you conquests that you don't benefit from. Do you know what my Imam gave me? My Imam gave me Sahif as-Sajjadiyya. I would never trade a Sahif as-Sajjadiyya for all the riches in Persia, all the riches in Byzantium, all the riches in Africa. This Sahif as-Sajjadiyya, my fourth Imam, did more for me than all of your khulafa combined. Your khulafa gave me nothing beneficial. Imam Sajjad, this one Sahifa is all I needed. You know what else Imam Sajjad gave? Risalat al-Huquq. Risalat al-Huquq, we would say, is one of the earliest treatises on human rights. In Risalat al-Huquq, he doesn't just speak about the rights of man. He talks about the rights of women. He talks about the rights of children. He talks about the rights of the slaves. He starts talking about the rights of your body parts, the right of your eye, the right of your ear. And when it comes to the way he treated his slaves, you know how Imam Sajjad used to treat his slaves? He used to sit with them and eat with them. He wouldn't say to them, bring in the food and then leave. He used to sit with them. He used to ask them how they were doing. He would ask them about their days. And one of the greatest narrations about him, it says every Eid, you know what he would do? He would gather his servants, his slaves, and he would say to them, you did this on that one day. I once called you on this day, you didn't respond. I once asked you for help on this, and you didn't respond. But then what he would say? He would say, but I'm letting you all go because today is Eid. This is my Eid gift to you. All that I ask in return is that you pray to Allah to have mercy on his servant Ali ibn al-Hussein, to have mercy on Zainul Abidin, salamullahi alayhi. Correct? Imam Zainul Abidin, salamullahi alayhi, and I believe we've gone on a little long, we'll be concluding soon. But I would like to read for you selections from al-Farazdaq's poem about him. Correct? Al-Farazdaq, and this is a story many of you have heard before. Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, who's like the prince, his uncle Al-Walid is or his older brother Al-Walid, la'anahullah, was the Khalifa at the time. And so he comes to Mecca to visit, the Kaaba. And he's trying to get to the Kaaba, and the people are just not making room. They can't tell who he is. Everyone's wearing white. Everyone is equal. The playing field is leveled at Hajj, isn't it? And so he can't get in. And so he angered, he leaves he starts watching the people circle, but then he sees a man approach, and the people immediately start opening up for him. They part. And there are many hadiths like this about our Imams. The Kaaba seems to pull them closer. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, years ago, him and his uncle Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, they said, let's settle in front of the people which of us is the Imam. Let's go ask the black stone. This is an authentic narration in Al-Kafi. And so Imam as-Sajjad him and his uncle Muhammad al-Hanafiya went up to the black stone in the Kaaba and they asked, which of us is the Imam? The black stone responded to Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi. And Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya said, my nephew, indeed, you are the Imam. I accept that you are the Imam and I accept your wilaya over me. So this is between Imam as-Sajjad and Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya. How's it going to play out between Imam as-Sajjad and Hisham ibn Abdul Malik? When Imam Zain al-Abidin is coming towards the Kaaba, it seems to pull him closer. And Hisham is disgusted. He said, who is this man that can get to the Kaaba while I, the son of Amir al-Muminoon, the brother of Amir al-Muminoon, I can't get to the Kaaba? Who is this? Al-Farazdaq, who had been for years the court poet of Bani Umayyah. In this moment, he recited what is probably his best-known poem, and it is, without a doubt, a masterpiece of Arabic grammar. What does he say about him? He said, this is he whose ability the valley of Mecca recognizes, and whom the sacred house recognizes, as do the sanctuary and outside the area outside the sanctuary recognize. Al-Hillu wal-Haramu in Arabic. This is the son of the best of Allah's servants. This is the pure pious man, the pure eminent man. When he comes to touch the corner of the wall of the Kaaba, it almost grasps the palm of his hand. He takes care to be modest and he is protected from his terror. He only speaks when he smiles. None of mankind has within their souls such primacy as he does, nor such grace as he does. And whoever knows Allah knows his friend, his wali. Religion is from the house of this man. When Quraysh saw him, their spokesman told of the outstanding qualities of this man, which indicate his nobility. And another line in the poem, what does he say? He says that this Imam, he says, if it weren't for La ilaha illallah, he would not say La. If it weren't for La ilaha illallah, he would never say no to someone. Anyone who comes with a request of him, he fulfills it. Correct? Hisham bin Abdul Malik was like, in all your years serving me and my family, you never recited a poem like this about us. You know what he said to Hisham? He said to him, bring a father and a mother like his, and I will give you a poem like that. Al-Farazdak was thrown in prison for reciting this poem about Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullahi alayh, for these 34 years, we said, of his Imam, as we said, he defied expectations. He absolutely defied them. But perhaps the greatest testament to his strength is the anecdotes related about him in Karbala, whenever he would remember Karbala. Because as we know, the mourning for Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, the mourning for what happened in Karbala on the day of Ashur, it was a practice started by Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa. It wasn't started by Imam al-Sajjad. He was merely following the sunnah of his grandfather, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imam al-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, I've asked the question, can you imagine never being able to look at water the same way again? Can you imagine every time water is brought before you, it brings back those memories? It brings back those horrible, awful memories of what happened that day. Correct? Imam al-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, it is narrated about him. It is narrated that Imam al-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, that whenever he would walk around Medina, he would see certain things that would bring back these memories. One of the things he would see, whenever he would see someone's janazah being recited, whenever he would see someone who's being prepared to be washed and he's prepared to be buried, he would ask the people at that funeral, you know what he would say to them? He would say to them, how long has it been since he died? He said, Ya Rasulullah, he died not too long ago. It is part of the rights of a mu'min is that you bury him as soon as possible. You honor his body. You don't leave it out for people to see. You don't leave it out for the bugs and the birds. You bury him, correct? Imam Sajjad, you know what he says? He says, my father Hussein was left out there for 3 days. For 3 days he was left out there. I had to come and bury him later. You know what else Imam Sajjad used to see? He used to see whenever he would walk past the butcher shop, whenever he would walk past the butcher, Allahu Akbar, you know what he would see? He would see the people, they bring the sheep, the goats that they're ready to slaughter. What does he see them do? The butcher, he puts out some water for the animal. He puts out some water for the creature. He says to them, do you always give your animals water? They say to him, Ibn Rasulullah, of course we give the animal water. It's inhumane to slaughter an animal before we give it water. He said to them, my father Hussein was slaughtered without a drink of water. They didn't even give him that. Then you know what else he would see? The butcher, when he wants to slaughter an animal, he takes it away from the other animals. You're not supposed to let the other animals see you slaughter one of its brothers, one of its kin. He would ask him, he says, do you always do this? Do you always hide the other animals when you prepare to slaughter one of them? He said to him, Ya Rasulullah, of course we do. It's not humane, it's not just, it's not halal to let the other animals see. You know what he says? He says, my father Hussein was slaughtered in front of me and in front of all the women of his household. Correct? Imam al-Sajjad, salamullahi alayhi, it is narrated that once Abu Hamza, salamullahi alayhi, came to see him. Imam al-Sajjad, he would see the Imam crying. He would remember Karbala every single year. He would remember Karbala every day. Abu Hamza al-Thumali, salamullahi alayhi, says to him, he says, Ya Rasulullah, isn't it time that you moved on? Isn't it time that you let go? That you forget about Karbala? You know what he said to Abu Hamza? He said to him, Ya Aba Hamza. And keep in mind, this man is the Salman of his generation. He said to him, Aba Hamza, Yaqub alayhi wa ala nabiyyina afdal salati wassalam. Allah gave him 13 sons. 13 of them. He lost one of them. He still had 12 more. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, after 34 years of leading the Ummah, some of our narrations say he was poisoned, he was assassinated, some say he died of old age. I follow the opinion that he was poisoned, that he was assassinated, because Sheikh Muhammad Baqir Sharif al-Qurashi transmits a narration. He says that al-Walid, na'natullahi alayh, he was extremely jealous of Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayh. And so he used to say, as Zuhri records, he used to say, La rahata li fi dunya. I have no, tranquility in this world. I have no peace in this world so long as Imam as-Sajjad is in it. Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, of course, we know the man who led his janazah, who buried him, who washed him, was his son Muhammad al-Baqir. But there were two marks on Imam as-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, on his sacred body, that Imam al-Baqir noticed as he was washing his father and he was preparing to lay him to rest. One was the bruises on his shoulder from that bag I told you about earlier. On this day, the people of Medina, and verily the Ummah, lost the man who had gone out of his way to feed them and to clothe them and to protect them from the evils of poverty. And he had the bruise to show it. But you know what else Imam al-Baqir saw on his father's body? He saw the marks from the chains that he had when he was being marched from Karbala to Kufa. The marks of the chains were still on his neck and on his hands all those years later. And so we pray to Allah Azza wa Jal, Ya Allah, bihaq Zayn al-Abidin, Ya Allah, by the one who was sick at Karbala, cure all of us who are sick. Ya Allah, bihaq al-Imam al-Sajjad, grant us ziyarah of Jannat al-Baqi. Allow us to visit Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, salamullah alayhi, who we have discussed, and Imam al-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, who we have discussed. Ya Allah, bihaq Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Many of us have gone through our own traumas. Many of us have gone through our own issues that have tested us. We know that you do not overburden a soul with more than it can sustain. Give us the patience of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, salamullah alayhi. Heal us in the same way you healed Imam Zayn al-Abidin, salamullah alayhi. Ya Allah, bihaq Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Do not put a barrier between us and Imam Sayyid al-Abidin on the Day of Judgment. Grant us his shafa'ah and the shafa'ah of his grandfather Rasulullah, bihaq Muhammadin wa alihi al-Athhar. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على